Hello. Today I have another back to basics video and I'm looking at how to perform actions only once per candle or bar. Now this is something that I often include in my videos, that I have a function that I call to determine if it's a new bar and I only trade once per bar. But what I'm going to do today is go into more detail on that and show some of the implications of using that and how you can work around those. So this, as I said, it's a back to basics type video, and I'll be referring to this in future videos rather than describe how to perform these functions in each of the following videos. So on screen I have the MetaTrader 4 editor, but the code that I'm going to be showing today is the same for MetaTrader 4 and 5. And I think the best place to start will be with a function that I use all the time to determine if this is a new bar. Now I'm going to start with the basic function that you would have seen many times before, but then I'll show some of the implications of that and show how we can address those. Now, because I want to write this code once, I've got here a once per bar. This is an expert advisor. It's just a sample expert advisor. It doesn't actually do anything. You can see I've got three functions that are called from on tick, and each of those functions does nothing. And I've also got an indicator, and this indicator does usual indicator stuff, and then this one function send mail, which also does nothing. These are just here to show how I'll implement the common function. It's unusual to do something in an indicator that only happens once per bar, but that's why I've included this function send email. You probably don't want to send an email every tick. You only want to send it when there's a new bar that perhaps meets certain criteria. So it could be a trade signal that you're sending out. So this is the sort of thing you would only want to send once on a new bar. In the expert advisor, you might want to close trades at the beginning of a bar, perform trade maintenance every tick, and only open trades on a new bar. And the order I've placed these is the order I typically see them occurring in an expert advisor. You usually want to close the trades first and then perform trade maintenance, which could be something like updating trailing stops. You would perform that every tick, and then the last thing you would do is open new trades. And as I said, you probably want to close trades on a new bar and open trades on a new bar and perform trade maintenance every tick. So first the function, and I call this function new bar, and it's a Boolean. Now this is the beginning of my new bar function. I first declare a date time variable that I'm calling previous time, and I'm declaring that as static and initializing it to 0. Date times are actually integers, so I can store a 0 in there, and that just sets this to the default value for that time. The static keyword here indicates that the value of this previous time variable will only be initialized the first time this function is called, so it'll only be initialized to 0 the first time you call the function. Each time you call the function after that, this variable will have the same value that it had when you exited this function the last time. So it's a static value of previous time, and it's a date time. I've also got a date time variable here, current time, which I simply set to, mistake there, itime symbol period 0. So itime is an inbuilt function in both MetaTrader 4 and 5. It takes a symbol, a time frame, and the bar number, and I want bar 0. So what this will give me is the opening time for bar 0 on the current chart. If you really want to use this for other symbols and time frames, then you might have to modify this function to accept symbol and time frame as arguments, but I've just built them into the function here. If you wanted to add these as arguments, you would probably include them with default values in case you don't want to supply them. So at this point in the code, I have a previous time, which either has 0, if this is the first time the function's been called, or the value that it had the last time we exited. Now this is the rest of the function as I normally write it. I'm performing a comparison here between previous time and current time, and remember, when we first come in here, previous time is going to be 0 and current time is going to be whatever the current opening time for the current bar is. If those two are different, so if previous time is not equal to current time, then the first thing I do is set previous time equal to current time, so that the next time we come into this function they will be the same, and then I return true. So this is a new bar because the value I had for previous time is not the same as the current opening time of the current bar. If that's not true, then I'll fall through to this statement and simply return false. So if I call this on the first tick of a new bar, Previous time will have the current time from the bar before. Current time will have the opening time for the current bar. They will be different. I will set previous time to the current time and return true. The next tick of that same bar, I come in here, previous time has the current opening time because a new bar hasn't been created. These two are equal, therefore this is not correct. And I just return here and return false, which says this is not a new bar. That's the standard function that I use all the time. If I went to my expert advisor here, if I only want to open trades on a new bar, I can say something as simple as if new bar open trades. Now I'll need to have an include statement in here first. I'll put that in the indicator as well. And so by calling this new bar, I'm going to have a true returned if this is the first tick of the bar, and I'll call open trades then, and I'll have a false returned if this is not the first tick of the bar, so I won't be calling open trades again. I can do the same here in the indicator. And only call this send email function if this is a new bar. But I said I would also want to call the close trades if this is a new bar. If I simply did that, then on the first tick of a bar, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to call the new bar function, which will return true, and then I will close trades. I'll perform trade maintenance, and then I'll again call new bar, and that will return false, which is incorrect because I actually want to call open trades because this is the first time I've been through this loop on that new bar. The usual way I solve that problem is to declare a variable and set that to the value of new bar, and then instead of calling the function here, I use that same variable, which is going to have the same value throughout this function. So that solves the problem in here of being able to call these two functions only on that new bar. But there are still some problems. And so let's address those problems in no particular order. The first one I want to talk about, when I start this expert advisor, I'm probably not at the beginning of a bar. And my logic may be such that I don't want to have allowed for price movement that happens during a bar. So typically I would not want to execute the new bar functions the first time I open the expert advisor. The easy way to do that is to simply call the new bar function in the onInit. And now until the bar changes, this is going to return false, so the first tick here. So let's say I'm running on a daily chart and I'm already 12 hours into that day. Before I start the expert advisor, I will call new bar here, and new bar will then return false until the next bar opens. And if I'm on a daily chart, the price has probably moved a long way from the beginning of the day, so the typical indicators that I would use to trigger a trade may be invalid. So that's the first issue. The second, if I look at this trade maintenance, and I said that I would probably use this for something like trailing stops. If I have, say, a two-part trailing stop strategy, one part might be to trail based on the lowest price of the three most recent candles. But to catch spikes in price, I might also want to have a trailing stop based simply on points. So that if the price goes way up because of a news event, for example, I might want to trail based on points rather than wait for that price to drop back again, which it typically does after those kind of price spikes. So that means that inside the trade maintenance function, I need to know also if this is a new bar, because I want to only trail based on the three most recent candles on a new bar, but I also want to trail based on that trailing price on every tick. Now there's an obvious answer to this, and that's simply to pass this new bar into trade maintenance. But then we're starting to pass values around all over the place, and I never quite know which function might want to know if this is a new bar. So there is a technique that I can use for this. And what I can do in here is also have bool So I'm still going to declare that variable, so I don't need to keep calling the new bar function. But then I can say I'll call it trail on candles, and at every tick I'll call that trail on price. So only on a new bar I want to trail based on the 3 most recent candles. I'll call that function. And if this is not a new bar, I want to trail on price in case I've had a big price movement. Now, if I call this new bar function here, obviously I've already called it here and it's going to return false. There are 2 techniques I can use for this. The first obvious one is to make the new bar variable a global value. So if I just declare here and then I can simply do this. And then in the trade maintenance function, I don't need to call the new bar function. I can simply remove that line. That's one option. I need to also copy that, paste here and there. So that's one possible option. But it does mean that if you include any other code that might want to know if this is a new bar, everything is going to rely on a global variable. And I don't like that. I don't like restricting other code to having global variables set. I would rather have everything handled neatly. So let me just take those changes out. And the next change I can make is inside this new bar function, which means that all of this is totally encapsulated here. I can add an optional argument here. I'm just going to set that as a Boolean. I'm going to call it first call, and I'm going to default that to false. And then here in the onTick function, this call, because this is inside the onTick function, must be the first call to new bar. I'm going to pass true. I also need to pass it in here in this new bar call from the onInit. And then in the new bar function, I'm also going to declare another static variable. Sorry, that should be static bool. So I've declared a result variable. It's a Boolean and that defaults to false, but it will obviously remember the value that it had last time we called here. Should be not. So if this is not the first call, I'm going to return the result, which will be remembered from the last time we called this function. So going back to the once per bar, when I make this call, I'm calling it with true. When I make this call, there's no argument there, which will default to false. Yes, it defaulted to false. So it will pass straight through this statement, which means I'll perform these statements. Now I don't simply want to return true here. I actually want to set result. And then I can return result. And the same here. And I'll return result. So to go through this, the first time I call this, first call will be true because I'm calling that from the tick. If first call is true, then I come through here and I do all of the usual work to determine if this is a new bar. If first call is false, then I'll simply exit at this point and return the same result that we had last time. And what I'm relying on here is that new bar is going to be called at the beginning of each tick. So that handles the ability to call new bar from anywhere as long as it's called with the true argument in this first call in the onTick. So there's no longer a need to have this variable, but it's not bad practice anyway, rather than calling a function repeatedly through here when I know the value is going to be the same all through this function. So I'll still store this in this new bar variable, but it means any other functions anywhere else in the code can do the same thing. They can call new bar and they will get the same result back. And now the next problem is handling restarts. So you get restarts for a number of reasons. If you open the input, say, for your expert advisor and make a change, or even if you don't make a change but you click OK, that's detected as a restart, and the expert advisor will come back into this on init section. We've already handled that because on that restart, it will call this new bar true, and unless you're unlucky enough to have done that exactly as a new bar forms, then new bar is already going to be returning false, so there will be no harm. You'll go back through the on init and call the new bar function here, which will set new bar to false. But if for some reason you don't want to do this, but you still want to handle restarts, then my best suggestion would be that you save the value in global variables. So if we go to the common functions again, and there's a mistake there, that semicolon should not be there. You would want to save the value of result in global variables each time, and then if this is a first call, you would want to reload that global variable. I won't show how to do that, that's a different topic to use global variables, but that's the best suggestion if you don't want to simply reset on the restart of Expert Advisor. I can also tidy this up a little. You can see that I'm setting result and returning it in two different places here. What might be a better way to go? So this way I'm setting result to false, and I'm only resetting it to true if this condition is met, and then I simply fall through here and return that value of result. But I'm still, if this is first call, or if this is not first call, I'm returning the value that I had previously. So this is the typical way I would use this new bar function, and the new bar, as I said, I put that in a lot of my code. I haven't demonstrated it here with the indicator because it is not used very often, but in the indicator I would probably do the same thing. I would say new bar true. True meaning this is the first time I'm calling the new bar function for this on calculate iteration. And then just change that to new bar. And now I can call this new bar function from anywhere, because as long as I call it here, which is typically the very first thing that's going to happen on a new tick, then I'll simply be returning true or false depending on the actual new bar value after that. And by running it this way, where I'm passing in that first call equals false, I'm not relying on any global variables. All the information that the new bar function needs to store to return the value and know whether this is a new bar is held in the static variables inside this function. Now, static variables are local to this function. So if I had another variable called result elsewhere in the code, it's not going to be affected by this one. And if I had another variable somewhere else called previous time, it's not going to be affected by this, as long as they're not the same name on the global scope. So if they're inside another function. I won't go into detail about it at this stage, but I will say if you are going to put these inside a class, then static variables operate differently inside a class. So this works because this is just a standard function that you can call from anywhere, and I don't really see much need to put this function inside a class. I would typically store this in a file, something like I've called it here common functions, and this is just generally available now. So that is how I would detect a new bar and only perform certain functions based on that new bar happening. In future, I will be referring back to this video rather than describe my new bar function in future videos. I hope this has been useful to you. If it has, please click the like button, and if you want to see more of our videos, click subscribe and click the bell icon to get notifications when we release new videos. Thank you for watching.